And welcome back to the 2009 Sawana Orewage Year in Review. We're back to cover the months of April and May right now.
Yeah, and we have a new guest on.
Yes, and she came in and...
Yeah, she comes everywhere with me. So. Okay, so the point I was trying to make was that everything was all timely with Keith. You know, he wasn't allowed to run. His eligibility came into question. Did he leave council in good standing the previous term? So this was all, being discussed. So at the end of the day, he wasn't allowed to run, and then he later on filed an injunction to try and stop the elections. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, we'll get to that in a little while, but that was the beginning of it all, was in March, end of March, April. Mm-hmm. Also in April, we had a few other stories. The zoning consultation survey, where people had come back that people had felt that zoning in here in the community has changed, and that something needs to change. Be done. Yeah, it needs to change. The difference between like a residential and a business, and the whole, environment. The environment, right. which is an ongoing theme this year. And one of the things that also was a big concern when we started planning for at that time was the swine flu. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's when isn't that when it hit? It really did hit in April, Mexico, like around April. Yeah, it started in Mexico, and then there was a big. It was like a worldwide scare. That's when WHO got involved, and the World Health Organization.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we move on to the swine flu, I wanted to say that at the community meeting around that time.
For the zoning?
For the zoning, yeah. Some people were concerned that industry was moving into residential areas. Mm-hmm. And not that that's necessarily a problem, but there are like health issues that come up, and noise pollution issues. Mm-hmm. And I think, that at that time the MCK started putting out pamphlets, their information campaign. People felt that, maybe if just common courtesy and common sense would prevail, then we wouldn't need to have zoning guidelines. So that's still being, I guess, on the table, being looked at. I suppose when something happens or someone complains again, it'll come up again. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's how it works.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people more or less agree that there needs to be. Because, I mean, it's easy to say that, common sense and consideration for the people around you and different things like that. But unfortunately, a lot has changed over the last, in terms of society. And I think we need to at least have something like that, some kind of guideline. People can't just go willy-nilly and, build and do and all these, some of these. It's not a comfortable situation. Yeah. And if we have at least guidelines, to fall back on. Well, this is the thing, is that the consultation did take place. The survey came back. They had talked about it at the community meeting, as Thomasina just mentioned, and then nothing. So right now we don't know where it stands. I know that the chief that was spearheading this did not get reelected back into the Mohawk Council system this year, so that could be one of the reasons that it's just stopped at this point. So hopefully, in the new year, there's a lot of things that happen like that, though. I find, you hear about them. It's really, there's a big consultation, there's a big debate, and then there nothing. Always is, it seems and then it dies down. It dies down, and then rears its ugly head again. Like months later, or when people or something else comes up. Reminds them of it. Yeah. So we'll see. Stay tuned. Okay. Yeah. So moving on. So we have Lindsay Laborn, who was elected as the elections officer for 2009. So, obviously that goes into elections. But before we hit June and July, when things really heat up, the MCK and the KTA begin to address regulations issues, because I think if you remember the first part of the year, there was still a lot of concern over saturation in the market. Lowballing, there was still a lot of talk about prices, and people were going out of business. So I think there was panic, and with the recession setting in, there was definitely a lot of talk about what can we do to make the industry more viable, and to make it stick for years to come. So they started to address, again, regulation. And then the KTA and MCK agreed that they were going to start working together in conjunction with one another in order to try and sustain
the industry here in the community. Right. They even went as far as to go and visit another nation that does regulate, which is the Senecas, and how they did it, and to see what steps were taken in order to regulate. So that was in May.
Yeah, the Tobacco Association has had a busy year. Reforming, and now dealing with some of the issues that are coming up in the industry. This year alone, how many robberies have taken place, and now that's a new thing that they have to consider and deal with.
Which was one of the reasons why they put security on, and then it seemed like a lot of the stores or even manufacturers, retailers got involved in securing their place. In terms of putting bars on the windows and having security cameras outside,
alarm systems, and so on. Yeah.
And because I think it was last year we ran a video of someone getting held up at one of the cigarette stores on the 207, I don't know if you remember. But it was like a real wake-up call for people that are working in this industry to know that this is a possibility, because it's unregulated,
Right.
So now with Bill 59 coming out only in, I think it was end of October, November, they're trying to figure out how they're going to deal with some of those issues, because it seems like that bill was made just for Kahnawake, So are they going to be stopping people as soon as they come out of, and this brings up again another large part of this is the policing issue, like if they're going to be harassing people coming from stores, pulling them over just as they did once before, it's going to create a lot of havoc here in the community. Is this going to become as volatile of a situation as it did years ago when before the industry fell on itself?
Right.
So I know the KTA is addressing some of these issues.
Yeah, or at least attempting to.
Yeah, attempting to, exactly.